Local stories, local people. We're taking you inside Western Mass news. It's the Even Better Western Mass podcast with Dave Madsen.
Good of you to join us for this week's edition of Even Better Western Mass. Well, the month of May is winding down. Hard to believe that June is right around the corner and the start of summer. Massachusetts has begun the process of reopening the state's economy. Interesting, though, many people I've talked with just can't wait to get out to do some shopping or visit restaurants and do other things. Others aren't in any rush to head out. Many of them feel that, until there is a vaccine for COVID-19, they really aren't comfortable doing so. I've really felt all along that we can open up the stores and we can open up the restaurants, but it's going to be up to each and every one of us to decide when it's time, when it's best for us to go back out. Wherever you are, though, I hope you're doing well and staying healthy. My guest this week is Ray Hershel. He is no stranger to Western Mass. Ray, of course, a veteran of 50 years of reporting the news in this area. Ray and I talk about COVID-19, how he and his family are faring, and how it compares with stories that he covered over his long and storied career. We also talk about his recent conversation with his college roommate, Henry Winkler.
How are you doing in all of this?
Well, thanks for asking, Dave. I'm doing pretty well. Maureen and I are doing as best we can under the circumstances. It's a whole new world out there, as you obviously know. But knock on wood, we're doing well. We're feeling good, and life has just slowed down. The pace of living has just slowed down. You're kind of confined to your house and your surroundings, and when you go out, who would have thought we'd be wearing a mask and having all these restrictions to live under? But we've got a few things going on here. We're doing more work in and around the house. And believe it or not, I'm even doing a little more cooking thanks to Maureen's tutelage. So we've been doing a little more cooking in the kitchen, but just staying safe in general and being as cautious as we possibly can. Trying to go to the grocery store only when we need to and that sort of thing. But, we've been adhering to the restrictions and just staying as safe as we possibly can. But thanks for asking.
What's your specialty when you're cooking?
Oh boy, we do different things. We like to we eat a lot of chicken. We enjoy chicken, and we've kind of concocted this chicken mushroom marsala dish, which we've experimented with. And over the course of the last couple of times we've made it, it's come out pretty well. We chop up the chicken, we slice the mushrooms, put in some marsala sauce, a little bit of garlic, and cook it, and then usually serve it. You can serve it over anything you want. You could serve it over linguine. You could serve it over potatoes or whatever. But it's a tasty little dish, and then we enjoy it, and you can eat it for a while.
Both of us have done this for over 50 years now. And in the whole scope of things, this whole slowing down and everything, I've found it, I don't know if you feel the same way, it's not all that bad.
Yeah, no, it lets you stop and take a break and smell the roses a little bit, I guess. But it's a totally different pace than we're used to. You've worked in news about as long as I have. And you know what a rat race business that can be. Pressure every day and deadlines and so forth and so on. So this is just stepping back, and it gives you a whole new perspective. It simplifies things a little bit more, but makes you more cautious. But it is a different pace. And actually, it's fairly enjoyable, from that perspective. So it's gone well so far, and we have no complaints. The thing it's a little bit tough is that you obviously miss the family gatherings with your kids, your grandkids, and that sort of thing. Because, as you know, our kids don't live in Western Massachusetts. My son lives in Rochester, New York. I've got daughters in Virginia and also in Maryland. So those road trips we had taken before for a few days to visit the kids and grandkids, I've been kind of put on hold. But you do more FaceTiming, phone calls, and that sort of thing. So it does confine you a bit to your surroundings where you are now. But it's a whole different slow down pace that we're all going through.
As you watch the coverage of this, at any time do you miss being in the trenches and being out there to be able to cover stories like this?
Yes and no. Day in and day out, just covering that kind of story is exhausting, both mentally and physically. And after 50 years in the news business, I was ready for a change, and I'm sure you feel the same way. So in a way, yes and no. You know, you kind of miss some of the big stories and the major events that are going on. But in another way, it's time to move on to a new chapter. And as you know, you've been doing your podcast and so forth. I've been doing a little part-time work for PBS in Springfield, WGBY, on their Connecting Point program, which is a good outlet for me, Dave. I don't know how you feel about this as well, but it gives me an opportunity to still stay in the game a little bit and to do the kind of interviews and do the stories that I like to do. I can choose what I want to do, when I want to do it, and it gives me the option of, you know, working a day or two or a week or whatever my choice is. So I've got that option. I've been doing a little bit of that for PBS in Springfield. So that's worked out well, and I like it because it keeps you kind of mentally sharp and sort of keeps you in the game a bit, but not at that frantic pace that you would if you were doing news 5 days a week and running around trying to gather the news constantly.
You know, when I saw you pick that up, I thought, what a great fit for you. And, you know, the other part of it is, too, is you still have a lot to offer. And what a great vehicle for you to do that.
Yeah, and it's a nice pace, too. It's the people there at 57 are great to work with. I like the format of the program. It's an interview format that they have 30 minutes every day at 7 o'clock at Connecting Point, and they cover a wide range of subjects. And I come from, we have a number of hosts on the show, younger, I might add, but everybody's younger than I am. So I give.
Yeah, don't you find that? It's
So I'm sort of the grandfather of the host, I guess you would call it. But it gives them a little bit of perspective. I come from a different perspective, a lot more experience and and different kind of outlook. So it's a healthy program there in terms of what the hosts offer and the kind of people we interview. We try to cover a wide variety of topics, ranging from the arts and music to politics. So it's a good format for me, and I enjoy picking and choosing basically what I like to do. Just one example, recently I had a chance to chat with friends of ours, Peter Picknelly and Andy Yee, talk a little bit about, the White Hut, which they've resurrected, are going to reopen in West Springfield, the iconic hamburger and milkshake joint. And then we also talked about the devastation that COVID-19 has had on the bus business. Of course, they brought the buses to a halt. And then the restaurant business, because as you know, Andy Yee, the Bean family group, they own several restaurants in Western Massachusetts. Yeah. So they've taken a major, major hit, but they're slowly trying to get back, on track. Picknelly told me the buses are being cleaned and, they're being sanitized as best they can and getting ready for resumption of services. And they were telling me also that when they open the restaurants, of course, they're going to have to be very careful and practice social distancing and this sort of thing. But they've got plans for the Student Prince in Springfield, right there on 4th Street, to open up in their outside venue, the beer garden there, and try to, get people coming back for an outside venue just to get the restaurant back on its feet. So they've got plans in the works, but things like this are good to talk about with these people. And of course, as you know, they're good friends of ours, and we've been interviewing them for years and years on the news. So it was nice to be able to chat with them. And that's the kind of thing we have an opportunity to do on this show called Connecting Point. So I've had a good run with it, and it's still going.
The nice part about that too, and I find that with a podcast, is you don't have to clip things down and make it a soundbite. It's like you let it go, you let it breathe.
Yeah, that is the truth. And because when you deal in news stories every day, you get 90 seconds for a story, and you get a soundbite or two that runs 8 to 10 seconds long. And if you're interviewing somebody for 10 seconds, I've always felt I'd rather just do the interview live and do it straight through instead of trying to listen to a 10-minute interview and pick a 10-second soundbite out of that interview, because it is a little bit challenging. But it's nice. It's relaxing. You got a format where you can ask some questions, you can breathe a little, and you can really get into the subject you're talking about. And it's good for the guests too, because they don't feel rushed. They don't feel like they've got the editing, their heads on the editing block where you're going to chop it off in 2 seconds. So it's good. It's a relaxing format, enjoyable format, and it's nice that you don't have to worry about sound bites here and sound bites there. So it's a totally different feeling from my point of view.
Yeah, you've covered a lot of stuff in your more than 50 years in radio and television. Have you ever seen anything like this COVID-19?
No, I was thinking about that the other day. No, 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 no. I mean, we've been through and we've covered, things like 9/11. I go back to the beginning of my career where we were covering all kinds of civil unrest in the country. We had the Vietnam War going on, and lots of death over there and demonstrations back home. We've had assassinations. We've had to deal with political assassinations and things of that nature, but nothing of this magnitude, Dave. And it's scary because it affects everybody. It affects the whole country. It's an invisible enemy that's out there impacting us. And it's just brought the economy to its knees. It's had such a devastating effect economically. And the thing is, right now, we don't know when we're going to come out of this totally, what the new norm is going to be. Hopefully, they'll have a vaccine as soon as possible. And that, I think, will help stem the tide and turn the corner. But you've got that big question mark hanging over your head, and you don't know from one day to the next just how this thing is going to go. Although it's sort of trending down now, we're getting a little bit ahead of the game. But there are so many unanswered questions out there that it is disconcerting. But no, I've never seen anything like this. And, I think we probably all know people who have been impacted by COVID-19. Just look at the Holyoke Soldiers Home as one prime unfortunate example, and all the veterans there who contracted the virus and have passed away. And just a couple of weeks ago, a person that I knew pretty well from politics in Springfield, he was an attorney, and matter of fact, he was an attorney that handled the closing for the house we live in West Springfield. And you know him, Paul Khalil.
Oh, yeah.
Passed away. I think he was 77 years old. And I hadn't seen Paul in a while, but he seemed like he was in good shape. He was sharp, a gentleman, a real nice guy. But when I saw that in the paper, I was really stunned and shocked. So I think it's hit home to a lot of people in many different ways. But it's something that nobody has seen before. It is totally new.
I think for me, Paul's death really brought it home to me. And when I first started covering this back in mid-March, I think it was St. Patrick's Day, the first time I did it. Yeah. We're talking about the most vulnerable group, 60 plus, and then I realized it's like, oh, that's me. Yeah, and you come to that realization because we don't feel it, and it's just. But then you realize, no, that is we're the ones impacted the most.
Yeah, for sure. And we are of that age group. That's why it's so important to take these precautions and try to stay safe. And another frightening thing to me about this virus is that it affects so many people in so many different ways, Dave. There are older people who have contracted the virus, gotten through it. There are younger people who have gotten the virus and not gotten through it. So it depends on how it hits you, how it affects you. So it's not just a carte blanche where if you're older, you're not going to make it, or if you're younger, you will make it, because it's mixed and matched, and there are young people who are dying as well. So that's the frightening part. When you get it, you just keep your fingers crossed that you're going to be able to fight it and pull through it, because you don't know just what kind of havoc it's going to wreak on your body.
You were talking about the Soldiers Home and the impact there. I was talking with a friend from East Hampton, and that recently, Bob Connor, a longtime selectman in East Hampton, very active in politics, owned a real estate agency up there with his family, was at the Soldiers Home, I believe 96. And this friend of mine was telling me, up until this hit him, he would read the Wall Street Journal every day. Just as sharp as can be. And when you see these men, and Bob had been through World War II in Korea, that this is what brings them down. I think that just adds to the tragedy of it.
Yeah, it's so tough to see, because what they've been through, what they've given to this country. And to see something like that just ravage that soldiers' home and affect so many veterans. I mean, these are guys who have survived the worst of worst conditions in wars and that sort of thing. They've made it through there. They're tough guys, and to see something like this bring them down is very, very disturbing to see. And you really feel for their families, and you hate to see anybody go out that way, especially these veterans who have given so much for their country, because without them we wouldn't be where we are today. So it is tragic. It is sad, and to see the number of veterans that have been taken by this virus at the Holyoke Soldiers' Home is just, it's astounding, and it's tragic. It really is.
Ray, I mean, as I mentioned before, you've seen a lot. As we look at this and everything else, do you see something positive coming out of this? I mean, that's my hope, that after all we've been through, that we come out on the other side of this better. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, you always look for reason for optimism, and you look for better days ahead. And I think maybe it'll give us a deeper appreciation of everyday life, and how we treat other people, and how we live our lives too, because you realize just how precious our lives are as we continue and we see this virus affecting everybody. So it shakes you up. It makes you realize that we are all so vulnerable on this planet, Dave. I mean, there are viruses out there. There are things that are going on that can make life very, very short. But you've got to appreciate the fact that life is precious. And as we move on, I think we'll have a deeper appreciation of our own lives and how we conduct ourselves, and how we live our lives. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that we get through this threshold, get this past the point of no return, get a vaccine, and get back to life as normal as we possibly can.
I heard someone say a couple of weeks ago that this is Mother Nature's way of saying, "Oh, by the way, you thought you were in control? Let me tell you who's in control."
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, because we are totally at the mercy of this virus. That's for sure. And it stops and makes you think of your own mortality. We're getting up in age. We're in I'm a couple of years older than you, but you think about that. You think about the mortality, and you think about where you are in terms of your age group and moving forward and so forth. So there are a lot of challenges out there, that's for sure, and a lot of uncertainty as well.
Hey, but this has allowed us to relive the 70s, where we can let our hair grow out. We don't have any choice.
I was going to say, I was checking your hair out there, and I don't think I've seen your hair that long before. I know I haven't gotten mine cut in a couple of months now, so I'm just trying to wet it and comb it back as best I can so it's not hanging down over my face. But I can't wait for those salons to open so I can go get a haircut again. I don't know about you.
I thought about trying it on my own, but no, it's not worth the risk.
Yeah, I did about a week ago. I had a little pair of scissors, so I was trying to cut around the ear and so forth, and then I was doing a hack job. It really wasn't coming out well, and I said, the next thing I'm going to do is cut my ear or something like that, and that'll be it. So I choose so forget that. I'm not going to be working with scissors on my own face and my own head. That's for sure.
Now, on the plus side of all this, I think for many of us, it's reconnected us with old friends. And that's something you did a couple of weeks ago. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that was great. You're talking, of course, about the Zoom chat with Henry Winkler.
Yep.
My old college fraternity brother. And Henry's a great guy. We go back a long way to Emerson College when we were both in the same fraternity there, same graduating class, the Alpha Pi Theta fraternity. Henry was a theater arts major. I was in broadcasting and English at the time. So we weren't in a lot of classes together. He was in the theater arts side, but we were in the same frat, so we had an opportunity. And it was a small school, a small fraternity, so you got to know all your fraternity brothers pretty well. But he's always remained a pretty good friend, although I don't see him a lot. He lives in California, of course, in Los Angeles, and we're out here on the East Coast. But he's always been in contact at various points, when we called him up to do things and this sort of thing. So the latest episode occurred because ABC, as you know, was running a special Gary Marshall Happy Days show big network show. And Gary Marshall, of course, was the creator of. He was a genius, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Gary Marshall was unbelievable, but he was the creator of Happy Days and some great shows like Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley. And I didn't know this, but he directed the movie Pretty Woman with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. So he was talented. He was a director, producer, but he was very, very good to Henry as well. And he really was responsible for Henry getting the role of the Fonz in Happy Days. So anyway, ABC was running the special, and our friends at Western Mass News called me up. Hugh Zeitlin actually remembered that Henry and I were college roommates. So he said, Ray, how would you like to do a Zoom chat with Henry? We can kind of tie it into the ABC special. So I said, that's a great idea. I haven't spoken to Henry in a while. So I said, I don't have a contact for him anymore. I know we've tried to get him in the past through his publicist and agent. So Hugh did a lot of background, a lot of legwork, finally got a hold of Henry's people. And one thing led to another, and we were able to agree on a time and had a nice little Zoom chat. So, I credit the folks at Western Mass News for kind of putting this together. And, Beth Ward wrote the story. Hugh kind of produced it. Bob Hastings was the photographer in the house here shooting the cutaway shot. So it all worked out very, very well. And we had a nice chat. Henry and I had a nice chat. And when I saw him, you think you've got the long hair and everything. His hair is getting kind of white. He's got a beard now. So he looked a little bit like Santa Claus to me. I hadn't seen him in a while. I hadn't seen him with that long beard. But just as nice as ever. Very nice man. And we had a very good chat, reminiscing about some of the old days, our fraternity brothers. And I've still got a picture here, Dave. Let me show it to you. If I can hold it up here. There's, we're getting a little go there.
Yep.
Remember, that was when Henry came to the station. I'm thinking it's probably mid 70s or so, about 1976, I would guess.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah, because I found the film from that. And
you did.
Yeah,
you did. And he was in Springfield. He was hosting an oldies show at the Springfield Civic Center, and came by the station because we were an ABC affiliate. And of course, Happy Days was an ABC show. So he came by the station to say hi. And then I did an interview with him too. So there you can see us, me
you
with
still have those pants?
Yeah.
You still have those?
I'm laughing because, Henry's leather jacket ended up in the Smithsonian, and I think my plaid pants ended up at Salvation Army somewhere. So it's funny though. We had a nice chat. We were laughing about the length of our hair. Look at the hair there too, long hair. But we had a great time. He did the weather forecast that day.
Yeah,
that was absolutely hilarious. And he even admitted, he said, I didn't know what the heck I was talking about. He was from the West Coast, so he was trying to point to these New England states like Rhode Island and Vermont and New Hampshire. Didn't know what they were, but he was doing the weather forecast and putting on a performance. It was very entertaining and very good. So we had a big chuckle over that. I remember too that I think Frank Knight was the weatherman at Channel 40 at that time. So when Henry came in, Frank was trying to give Henry some tips and tell him a little bit about the weather. And Henry was kind of listening and winking, and I think it went in one ear and out the other. But when the camera went on, Henry just performed and did the forecast, almost like an entertainment show. Very, very, very good. We had a great time that day at the station. But
I remember watching it because I was in radio at the time. This is before I got into television, watching it and how entertained I was. And I brought my sister Lisa and her friend Cindy to the concert that he emceed. It was like an oldies review. And he was terrific. In watching your interview with Henry, what I've never been amazed by, but what I mean, he's so appealing, and I mean, he's sustained for so long, is his just optimism. He's always been that way, just really, really optimistic about everything.
Yeah, and he's a very humble guy, a very nice guy, very genuine, and there are no pretenses, no airs about him. And he's very interested in what you're doing, what's happening in your life. So it's not always about me. He's very interested in you and any other person that he really comes in contact with. And you've heard these stories, and I've heard from a lot of people who say what a nice guy is. He seems like a great guy, a genuine guy. And that's the kind of guy Henry is. I think when he found out that we were doing the interview, and you remember the old fraternity days, he was certainly willing to do the story, because I don't think he granted any other interviews in terms of that Happy Day special. So he remembers his friends, and I remember a couple of instances. This was back, I think, Dave, around year 2000. He was in a Broadway show with John Ritter, the late John Ritter.
They were good friends, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, really good friends in New York on Broadway, called The Dinner Party. It was a Neil Simon play. And Maureen and I and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law went to New York to see the play. And afterwards, we were waiting for him as he was coming out the stage door. And then he knew we were going to be there. We had gotten a hold of him. So he came out, he ran right up to us. Of course, there were a crowd of people gathering around to try to get his autograph or picture. And so he came up to us, and he took the camera I had. I was trying to get a picture of him, and he says, "No, let me get a picture of you and Maureen." So he was just doing his own thing, very nice, and he was just trying to get a picture of us. He didn't have a big ego or was talking to the people, and seemed to be very, very down to earth, a very nice guy. But that's the kind of guy he is. He's very interested in other people, and he treats other people very nicely. Another instance, years and years ago, he was in Western Massachusetts, Dave. He was receiving an award from the Springfield Jewish Federation. It was a big dinner at the Chez Joseph. And the folks at the Jewish Center asked me if I would MC the event and introduce Henry, because they knew my connection with him at Emerson College and his fraternity brothers. So I introduced Henry at the event. But I remember that very well, because before that event started, Henry, he must have gone to every table in that place and talked to people, shook hands with people, wanted to see how they were doing, very much interested in the other folks as well. So that's the kind of guy he is. He just, he's interested in you, what's going on in your life, what's happening, but, not at all stuck on himself, if you will. So he's a genuinely nice guy. We had a real nice chat, and, we enjoyed it a lot. And he said the same thing. He said, we're all in the same boat. I mean, he's busy. He's got a lot going on. They're ready to start filming the third season of Barry, that HBO series he won an Emmy for. And so he's got stuff going on, and he's another part of his life, which is fascinating. And I didn't realize the degree to which he does this, is that he's co-authored all kinds of children's books, Dave, because Henry Winkler is dyslexic. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't really diagnosed till he was like 31 years old. So he went through college and school, didn't do well in school mark-wise. He almost flunked out of college a couple of times, he told me. But they didn't diagnose it until he was in his early 30s. So it's played a major part of his life. It always gave him a little bit of an insecure complex, because people thought he was dumb. They called him dumb when he was young and in school. But he just had dyslexia. So he's written a number of children's books. One is the Hank series, and it deals with a kid who is dyslexic and the challenges, the ups and downs that he goes through. And it's a series of books that have really been well received all over the world. So he told me, outside of his family, he says, my greatest accomplishment is, writing those children's books, because it's done so much good for so many people all over the world. And this is a guy who was, the Fonz, the TV icon of the time, back in the 70s and 80s. So it means a lot to him. And I didn't realize just how many books he had written, but he's very, very proud of that achievement and accomplishment.
And that's it. There was nobody bigger than him in the 1970s and into the 80s. And I think that was one of my favorite parts of the interview too, where he talked about all of this and this COVID-19 being the great equalizer. There's, it doesn't make a difference how famous you are, how rich you are. We're all in the same boat.
All in the same boat. You're at home, you're going out when you have to, and you just, you're staying safe and, trying to keep close to home as possible. But getting back to this Fonz character that he portrayed, and the Gary Marshall connection, he was saying, after 10 years, Happy Days was on the air from 1974 to 84. And it was the number one show for a couple of years there on ABC, number one on the entertainment venue. And Henry, after Happy Days ended, had a tough time because he was always being typecast as the Fonz. And when he wanted to move on in his acting career, he had to get out of that typecast or that mold of Fonzie to try to act in other movies and situations. So Gary Marshall was very helpful to him in that regard. He helped him kind of bridge that gap because for a number of years after Happy Days, Henry wasn't making movies. He was involved more in producing, directing, and that sort of thing. He got into a number of TV shows. Remember the old show MacGyver?
Yep.
Well, he produced MacGyver, so he got into that. Eventually, he got back into the movies in the early 90s. He did some movies with Adam Sandler, The Waterboy, and that sort of thing. So he did eventually bridge that gap, but it was tough for him. It was the toughest part, really, of his professional career, apart from going from the Fonz to other acting parts in different movies, because, once you're so big in one role, everybody looks at you and says, there's the Fonz. It's not Henry Winkler, there's the Fonz. So he had to get out of that typecast mold, and it took a number of years for him to do that. It was very, very challenging for him.
One of the things that always impressed me about him too was that at any given time, because I know he was doing movies and everything else when he was the Fonz, he could have left that show and gone on to other things like other people do. But I think that speaks of his loyalty to Gary Marshall for the break that he gave him.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what was great about that show? Gary Marshall, I had read in an interview, said that of all the shows he did, and he did the blockbusters, he did Laverne and Shirley, he did Mork and Mindy, he did Happy Days. Of all the shows he did, the cast and crew of Happy Days had the best chemistry both on and off the set. They got along very well professionally. They got along very well personally. They, for example, did a lot of socializing together off set. They had a softball team that traveled all over the place playing charity softball games. Winkler was the pitcher, I think, on the softball team. But they had a great camaraderie. They got along very, very well. And I think that's one of the reasons the show was so successful. Because when you have chemistry, you have that intangible that really can make a series something special that Happy Days had. And when you look at Happy Days, you look at the characters of Richie Cunningham and all the family. They were very close. They got along well together, and you could see that, I think, in the Happy Days episodes themselves. But in real life, they were very close as well, and that was one of the things that stuck with me as well. Just a great chemistry there.
Let's get back to Ray Hershel. One of the things I meant to ask you 2 years ago when you were retiring, I mean, you have a lasting impact and continue to have an impact on the people and events here in Western Massachusetts. When all is said and done, as we wrap this things up, how would you like to be remembered?
I think, Dave, probably as, I'd say, a good family man, guy who's loved his family, loved the community in which he grew up. A Western Massachusetts guy, born and bred here, worked my professional career here. Who always tried to treat people with respect. In my job, try to present fair and objective news stories. But for the most part, I think practice the golden rule of trying to treat others the way you would like to be treated as well. I've always tried to treat individuals with a lot of dignity and respect, and try to live my life that way as well. But somebody I think who's really, loved my family, loved my country, and been very grateful, for the career I've had and the opportunity I've had here in Western Massachusetts, just to make so many friends and to accomplish what I have. It's something that I really cherish every single day, even in retirement. As I look back on that career, it's been a great run, and I have no regrets.
You and I are very, very lucky to be able to live and to work where we both grew up, and that one of the parallels in our careers.
Yeah, that's for sure. And These days, it seems like that's happening less and less. There are folks who just work a couple of years in a market and move on, and that's fine too. It's a different life, a different style, but we were born here in Western Massachusetts and made our careers here. We've had opportunities to move on, but have decided not to. Maureen is from Western Massachusetts as well, so we had family and friends here, raised our kids here, and once you start to settle down and establish roots, have children, it gets tougher and tougher to leave. But I've been, and you as well, we've done well in our business. We've been treated very well, and our employers have treated us with a lot of respect. So it's been a good run. I mean, we've contributed, but they've treated us well as well too. So it's something that I certainly appreciate, and I've enjoyed very, very much over that period of time.
And all the things we've seen and done, you think we're going to come out of this all right? I think this COVID-19.
I think so. I think we just have to be patient. Continue to practice social distancing and wear our masks out in the public until we really turn this corner. But we're going to be okay. We just have to be patient, and we got to realize that we're dealing with something that we've never ever dealt with before. So we cannot be too safe in taking precautions. But next year or whatever, because we're not going to turn the switch and everything will be back to normal next month or the month after that. It's going to take a while. It's going to be gradual, but eventually that time will come, Dave, where we'll either get medical treatment that's available or a vaccine, and we'll look back at this and say, boy, that COVID-19 was just a nasty, nasty virus. Thank God for the medical researchers and all the doctors and first responders and the healthcare professionals who helped us get through this, with the sacrifice they have made. So someday we'll look back on it and just say it was a terrible scourge that really impacted so many people and took so many lives, and move forward from there. But hopefully that won't be not that far in the future.
Let's hope we can look back on that about 20 years from now when we have this discussion again.
20 years from now, you know how old I'm going to be in 20 years? I don't want to tell you.
The two of us. Thank you, my friend.
All right. Good talking to you, Dave, and keep up the good work.
Thanks to my longtime friend and colleague, Ray Hershel, for taking the time to be with me this week. I'm Dave Madsen. Thanks for watching or listening to this week's edition of Even Better Western Mass. Wherever you are, stay well, and if you can, join me next week.